Hello, everybody. Hope you are having a wonderful Saturday afternoon or evening or morning, depending on your time zone. Welcome to the Balance Breakdown podcast. We're going to be talking about the state of the game, as well as some balanced discussion on individual characters and system changes. And with me, I have Amaron, if you want to introduce yourself.
How's it going, everybody?
And Foxy.
Hello.
Java Morris.
Hello.
And Zale.
Hey, yeah.
Okay. And we will have K9 on a bit later, so you'll hear from her as well. She'll be showing up. And today we're just going to talk about system changes and balance. We'll read a couple questions that we had on Twitter at the end and hopefully have a really insightful discussion. So we're going to open up by talking about the system changes, which I will be starting off with. The big ones for me were the visual change to IB and the pre-block change, as well as the input buffer. In my opinion, these are changes that only raise the level of play in the game. It's made a lot of stuff more consistent, it's made a lot of stuff easier, and it just makes the game feel more complete and a lot smoother now than it was on 1.0. If anyone else has any thoughts, you're welcome to jump in.
Yeah,
I'd like to
definitely the changes to IB Flash and, the bonuses for IBing certain attacks. Definitely, I've seen more people fish for IBs, especially at the end of block strings or during, openings in block strings where usually frame traps are. And especially, the high-level play has definitely increased substantially thanks to that.
Yeah, I definitely that was actually the part I was going to talk about too. I really like the changes to IB because one, as far as how hard it is to IB, it's literally exactly the same, but just because of the feedback is so much more clear, they have a different audio cue and a much more clear visual cue when you do it. It's feels easier to do. And also, everyone's seen Evo Moment 37 or whatever the number is, where Daigo does the parry against, Dora the Explorer or whatever. But I mean, and people go for that stuff. I'll do palm super sometimes. People hey yo, watch this, and they'll be blocking the Daigo parrying all the dogs, and they'll just go for a low and they'll die. But people going for that.
Okay.
It's really fun to see that kind of stuff happen, and I think the more we get into this, the more we're gonna see people combine the two ways to prevent chip at the end, which is both IB and push block, to make some really hard to break defense.
Already.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I wanted to expand on the IB. Already we're seeing evolutions in how we deal with chip damage. Preventing things like people overcommitting to a special attack to try to chip you out. You IB it, you're plus, you get a nice punish and reverse the situation on them. Always feels nice, and it just adds enough interactivity to those round end scenarios that keep making it feel fun for both players, instead of sometimes in 1.0 you would kind of be in a checkmate scenario with no answers to getting chipped out. But absolutely now, with the combination of push block and IB, I think it's in the best state it could possibly be in.
Especially when it's versus Ollie or Velvet, when you get that full screen run in, pop, IB, run in, pop, IB, and just do that and win the round, there's no better feeling than that. That stuff makes you feel like a superhero. It's really fun to do.
Feels mad good.
I think it's also really interesting from the point of view of the offender or the person on offense. Having to switch up your pressure if you know that somebody's going to try to go for an IB and try to get a punish off of you. I like seeing the different types of pressure and the different types of no cancels that people are trying to go for, because they're trying to fish out for a misinput backdash, or fish for those few frames where someone's returning to neutral.
Never underestimate the power of a kick in the head.
I think it's nice to see new stuff on both ends.
Fight.
I would like to add on that. I feel like the pace of pressure has completely changed. One, because of the input buffer, and two, because of IB. Stagger pressure was already really good in 1.0, obviously, but it's even better now and the timing is a lot tighter, which has sped up the pace of the game. And I've already kind of noticed in playing long sets with players at a high level, we're starting to adjust our strings to people's IVs and mess with our timings a lot more than I felt like we were incentivized to in 1.0. And keep in mind, guys, IB was already really good in 1.0. It was just not communicated super clearly to the player. So the fact that we're seeing so much evolution of it in our first, I think this is month 2 almost of 2.0 is really, really impressive. It just goes to show you how much that kind of visual change can make an impact.
It's not just the visual change. There's an auditory change as well to if you get IB'd. So just like you said, all these things go hand in hand with making the player feedback a lot more clear, and that's incredibly important for a genre like fighting games. Because you need to be able to recognize things in those small amount of frames when they happen.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back to like, the Daigo parry, like when you think of it, like one of the biggest things is like the cymbal sound of like the third strike parry, which like both like in the visual of like what's happening obviously. So like both of those working together to just make it not only something like more noticeable for the player, but like more gratifying for the player, right? Because playing yourself a little symphony on your enemy, dude, like it's great.
And
it's definitely like. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say beyond IB and push block, but if you had something to add on to them, go for it.
Oh, like IBing to avoid chip out situations feels the best. Especially if you like IB a multi-hit super like Velvet Super or Oleander Super. It's not really all that viable to wow. Sorry, that magic dash caught me off guard.
It's pretty good.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, the IBs to avoid chip out is like such a god tier change. Now I don't have to like lose advantage to spam push block to avoid being chipped out. In fact, you gain advantage because of the frame advantage you get from IBing. So
Right.
it's a nice counterplay element to that.
If we have any other closing thoughts on IB or input buffer, I would like to hear them now, because I also want to talk about damage today, because that's a big change.
I don't think we even mentioned the input buffer. The input buffer is absolutely
So good.
Like the biggest thing is it just makes, the developers, when they give a move a certain kind of frame data, like, okay, so these other moves with other frame data that beats it, like if say if a move's -6, you expect everyone to be able to 5A and everyone except Tion to be able to 2A it. That's like those numbers are what they use to design like counterplay for a lot of it. And in 1.0, a lot of that counterplay was much harder than intended because the input buffer was just simply too tight for it.
Well, there was no input buffer.
Yeah.
For
So like the
normals.
inputs rather were too tight for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, it ups the level of play so much because you can just punish people for doing high risk stuff better. And I think that always to me makes for a better feeling game because players who minimize risk tend to come out on top and be a lot sharper.
That's exactly what I was about to say. It at like a mid higher level, it minimizes. You see a lot more safe play because if you do something, people who lap out these situations of unsafe things can, and it segues into damage really well, but they can get their best starter off of stuff just because like if you block an Oleander 6C, you can actually buffer 5C out of your block now. And get that max damage combo that you were trying to go for. That was something that was
God
really,
damn it,
really hard
Icebound.
to do in Icebound. To do in 1.0. He's done it again, folks. What can I say?
He's not even here.
I can't think.
I'll get you.
It's something that's really nice. You can block Icebound 6B and you can buffer 5C. And you can kill him
Exactly.
for doing it. That was something that you weren't able to do without like tons and tons of practice and then really good awareness. Like 1.0, you were lucky enough to get away with like your 5A and get your punish off of that. But things have just gotten so much better now. It's so much more explosive, and the play had to clean up for a little bit to adjust to that.
That
Yeah,
really
definitely.
started a whole hashtag stop icebound. Yo, just trying to get punished pretty easily. Oh my god.
Speaking of punishes, things like back in 1.0, things like only under 2-2D were exceptionally hard to punish for in some instances where most people will try to land cancel it to make it easier because of the way the block stop works on 2-2D, but now with the buffer, it's much easier for a more consistent punish. And since it's -9 on block, like 5A punishes are the way to go.
And you can even go with the normal punishes just because of the input buffer affording you that now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
a lot of moves got much higher risk than they were in 1.0, because in 1.0, most of the time, like you said, people would punish you with a light normal starter. But now with access to reliable medium normal starters and heavy normal starters, suddenly you need to reevaluate what kind of risks you're taking whenever you perform your offense. And we see this actively with things like overheads in the game right now. So it's a very interesting and I think better change for the game, and it affords more risk rewards thinking for the players. And on the topic of IB itself, there's actually a very interesting discussion in the community a bit ago concerning how IB affects the... Help me remember the technicalities of it, but it was if IB necessarily makes things too easy, or it affects the level of play in a bad way. What was the argument that was being made?
No, I think you're thinking of the discussion about input buffer.
Yes, I was thinking about input buffer, excuse me.
Yeah, there was a big thing about whether or not input buffer was a balance change, which, I mean, I wrote a whole thing about that. So first of all, no. It's really not it's upping the level of play faster effectively. Calling it a balance change would be a bit of a stretch.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's what you're thinking of.
That is what I was thinking of. The topic was to expand on it, just like you said, that like we said, for example, certain overheads are now reliably punishable by moves that they weren't reliably punishing before. That's not to say that players couldn't do it, but the risk of going for that high execution punish wasn't usually worth just going with a 5A and taking something that was relatively guaranteed. Now with the advent of the input buffer, there was an argument to be made that this is more of a balance change. So on one hand, you had people who viewed it as a balance change, and on the other hand, you have people who view it as more of just accelerating the level of play, as you put it, Grunkle. Because theoretically, nothing is really stopping players from sitting down and grinding out these timings until they achieve it. And, the argument is all this has done is just kind of remove that barrier to the level of play. So I'm wondering if you guys had any more thoughts concerning that argument.
I think all of us here are pretty much on the same page with regards to that. While I think hypothetic, if you really wanted to, you could design the game around, okay, well, basically if the player's really good at mashing their reversal button, they can get this punish, but if they're not, they can only get that punish. But in turn, that rewards, especially at anything but the high level, it just rewards not great play. And I think in general, because it both does that, it makes it harder to, makes the counterplay harder and more rewards not sustainable play by making that counterplay harder. It just kind of holds everything back. So I don't really see any benefit from it because it's just more aggravating and doesn't really help where the meta is going.
To add on to that, in the perspective of the attacker, right? They have to be more careful and more, decisive about their pressure and their offense. And I think that's really helping, like you said, the player base accelerate more in terms of like skill level, as well as you know, just overall, it's a nice kind of yin and yang effect. Like this balance or this, you know, quality of life change, I would call it. It just helps push the meta along, and now we're seeing so much more, so much more challenging, so much more like courage. It's very like invigorating to see more players going for all these kind of like setups and wacky things. It's it's hilarious.
I just want to touch on this because we're just about out of time with this topic, but if I can just get a yay or nay from everyone, do you guys like the readjusted damage values? Because I absolutely love it.
Go with it.
I would go with a solid yes, if only because in 1.0 there was sometimes a tendency due to how some matchups worked for things to drag. And now mistakes or capitalized opportunities are a lot more meaningful in 2.0. We see this pretty actively, you know, if you get hit with a C normal, or if you are getting consistently reset by things like JCs, you will kind of die. And this is a lot different than in 1.0, where yes, there was large damage, but the large damage had a lot of conditions and meter dump and everything required to achieve it. So some matchups kind of proceeded at like a glacier pace, and some matchups kind of just ended, and now we're seeing a normalization of it across the board, which is pretty good.
Okay. So with that, I want to move on to our next topic. We're going to start going into individual characters now. K9 is not here, but Foxy, if you could start us off, why don't you tell us your first impressions about Shanty?
Shanty's a character with moves.
Tell me more.
I'm very, very much so liking Shanty off the bat. She plays her role as a glass cannon character very well. I've heard a couple of people, including a few of the people in this voice chat, say that we're gonna have a little bit of time until we see the full effect of what Shanty can do at a higher level. But as it stands, she's already still really, really good. She's got a lot of good stuff to make opponents commit. She's got a lot of good stuff to open up people who are blocking. Her short hop pressure is outrageously good. She has, and I don't see too many other people use this, but I love it. She has a really, really good possible focus on evasion rather than blocking. And getting people to do stuff and then forcing them to whiff and then punishing that whiff with a full-on stagger is like, it makes you like, mwah, and it's really good. It's really good. This character's really good. She does have some obvious weaknesses, like defense. She doesn't really have much except for her super and the basic mechanics of the game. Like we talked about how they're better at this point, so she can survive, but she doesn't have much to get opponents off of her or to bust her out of fake stuff, like say Paprika's flop or Arizona's deadbuck or Velvet's DP. She's just kind of got to rely on herself and keep the advantage for as long as she can. But yeah, she's really good.
I guess for my 2 cents on it, I think it will be interesting, as Foxy said, to see how her evasion evolves as time goes on, because she has a hyper high profile and a hyper low profile move. Her high profile move being 4-6-C, which she, you know, I forget what the proper name is, but basically she goes up and she either falls down on you with her head and puts you into a stagger, or she just holds the button and doesn't do anything off of it. She can also cancel it into a stance special or a super, so lots of things you can do off of that, and not all of them involve committing, which is good, because if it always involved committing, it wouldn't be quite as probably viable as what it needs to be. And then her stance, actually, which we haven't really seen a lot of this too much, but her stance is like the singular most low profile move in the game. I think probably like next to flop if I had to guess, because you have like Palm's 2B pancake hurtbox, whatever, and that's like pretty small. But I swear, like Shanty's 5D her stance hurtbox is almost like non-existent. If you're not literally touching the ground, it's not going to hit that. So it'll be very interesting to see how that evolves. But like right now, we're not seeing too much of what will probably be her strongest thing, and what we've seen other characters in, or similar characters in other games have become like their strongest thing is their like fuzzy pressure, and that with Shanty comes off of her short hops, because most of her normals, her jumping normals, can lead into a fuzzy by themselves. I think JA can lead into a fuzzy JA off of itself if you land or like do it super low to the ground, but JB and JC can both fuzzy into a JA very consistently. And for those of you who don't know what fuzzies is, basically it's where a character hits you high and you're still in the block stun of the first move by the time they hit you high again. So even if you would have been crouching by holding down at that point, your character's not crouching. So it's like, oh, I'm crouching, that would have whiffed. It doesn't, because your character hasn't had the time to return to neutral, add a block stun, and start crouching. So like, and you can do that repeatedly, and then Shanty has incredibly good like low normals and stuff like that. So there's like a lot of really scary pressure options Shanty has.
Jump
And
yeah. Jump in here. I just want to say, because I know people are going to think this, you might think, well, can't you just absolute guard the fuzzies? And technically you're right, but Shanty can continue to do them through push block, and on top of that, forcing the opponent to either push block or just take a 50-50. Like, knowing where someone is likely to push block is one of the most powerful things you can have on offense at a high level in this game. It's one of the things that makes Can so strong. On top of that, Shanty also has really good throw pressure, which is extremely important in this game, and high damage to back it up, and I think that that's really important.
I would say she's probably the most or second most average damage in the game, competing with Paprika at the moment.
That sounds right.
Yeah,
I'd probably put her third, but when she has magic, at least I could put her there.
Yes, with magic. That's the caveat, because I've seen y'all do some magic dumb combos, just, you know, Thanos snap people out of existence. I'm like, okay, I was at 50% health, and now I'm dead.
So
are we
like,
Pretty much.
I was just gonna say, are we like, I guess mostly for Foxy and Java, because you guys play Shanty, but are we feeling that magic is mostly a damage booster now more than any utility it has?
Nope.
I think certain things have specific utility, but it's also like incredibly good just combo filler, especially because there's a lot of it. Like when you do certain things, you'll have a lot of it. Also, I think her parlay, if you do a meaty parlay level 2, it can leave you up to +12, which is insane. And people who aren't ready for that just keep getting like, will get repeatedly blown up by it. So I think
mashing, you can't stop.
Yeah. Dude, I mean, if you want to, that's fine. I'll take this Fando. I mean, if you give it to me, I'll take it. But like, I think while her magic does like do a ton for her damage, it also has utility in corner carry especially, and god damn it, I frozen grab looking dude, but so it does have a lot of utility in damage. I think it has corner carry. Each of the stances has a specific thing it can counterplay. I'd say stance B has like crazy disjoints for anti-air stuff. Stance C goes through projectiles and will cross you up if you're crouching. I think that can have its use, although it's kind of gimmicky. And stance A is just incredibly fast slow. It like goes almost half screen like in 10 frames. It's very fast. But I think, I don't know, for me the main one would probably be damage, but I think they all still have their uses. And I know Foxy's been doing some cool stuff with like wall stick, so what do you say, Foxy? Or not wall stick, like wall climb, whatever you call it.
I think for magic, It can be used for damage and it can be used for the corner carry. I especially like using it on pressure to layer in a lot of strikes before I actually go for like the deciding throw bait. But another thing that I also really like to use it for that I've been experimenting with lately, it does wonders when layered into like 460 stuff. Because then you actually have something to be able to cancel that 460 out of. And the mix-up is no longer, are you going to let the 460 rip, or are you going to feint it? Now it's, are you going to let it rip? Is it going to feint? Are they going to 460 ahead of you? Are they going to stance and dash at you and run at you and then low? Or are they going to overhead at the point where it's going to be a cross-up? Or are they going to like go away and stance and run away and go and shout again? Like, there's so much that this character can do with magic that's mix-up based that I've just never... I considered the damage once and then I never really looked at it again just for pressure in mix-up stuff.
I mean, so yeah, I guess magic has a lot of uses on across many things. Also, two mixes I want to add to that are like really funny is off of 4-6C into magic, she can do a low or a cross up high, and they both are like relatively hard to react to. It's hilarious. But yeah, that's my 2 cents on the thing.
I ain't afraid of no ghosts.
Okay,
That'll
there's
be
no
a
more closing
luscious
thoughts on
dick.
Shanty. I do want to move to the next
Round
character,
one.
so if you have
Fight.
anything to say, speak now. For the
Level 2, level 2 just does not... This is just like my personal thoughts, but I think we still need to see a little bit more out of her level 2. It's not really, I guess, compared to Tianhuo's level 2, and Shanty's level 2 at first left a little bit of something to be desired, but after playing with it a little bit more, it just seems a lot more like a damage pump super, like to buff Shanty's damage. Her flaws are still like really, really big. She's the same character except with more magic gain. And so whenever you get touched by a character in this meta, if you have level 2 and they have level 2, they'll just put you into a cutscene combo and you'll lose your install immediately off of that. So you just want to like keep your offense going for as long as you can. It's a little bit risky to go for mix-ups with level 2 out because of what I said before and earlier. So I really like to see a little bit more use out of Shanty level 2 besides just damage. It'd be nice.
She is the stowaway.
One last thing, 2 seconds. Neither me or Foxy are like super comfortable with this, but one person who's incredibly good with it is K9. Stancels on Shanty allow her to have like insanely safe block pressure and like allow her to continue her block pressure into itself for a very long time when done properly. So like big part of magic there if you can
Can
do
you
stancels
clarify what a
properly.
stancel is, Java?
Oh yeah, my bad. I'm just like all up in my head with terms and stuff. So stancel is amalgamation of the words stance and cancel. So your stance canceling, you can stance cancel a normal on block, and what that does is if someone blocks your like, let's say your 2C is Shanty normally, I think you'd be like -4 or something like that. But no, I mean you'd be minus a lot more than that actually.
You'd be like -7 if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's probably right. So you'd be like -7, which is very unsafe. They can just jab out of it. But if you do a stance and then unstance, after you have your 2C block, you're instead +2. And having that allows you to take the end of your block string and bring you back to the beginning of your block string. And then if they don't respect that, they get hit, counter hit specifically. So like stuff like that is incredibly important when it comes to pressure, and I think that's definitely another thing we'll see develop more as Shanty is more developed. But either way, we have run out of time on Shanty, and we're going into
Arizona. So
Arizona discussion.
you're gonna take us away, Java, because you played the heck out of this character in 1.0, and you played her a lot in 2.0.
I did play Arizona in 1.0. I haven't played her quite as much in 2.0 because I feel like, you know, I feel like especially just general note in 2.0 is that with the introduction of Shanty and a lot of people trying her out, I've seen a lot of the player base who used to be like, you know, one-trick ponies, like branch out on other characters, and them myself being one of them. I started experimenting with Palm at the end of 1.0, but now I've played 3 characters like at a decent level, which is Arizona, Palm, and Shanty. And Arizona, so I had the funny like headbutt loop thing going on at the end of 1.0. I very much enjoyed that, and that getting taken away a little bit took away from my enjoyment of Arizona, but I want to make this unequivocally clear that Arizona is still an amazing character, and them taking away like her hyper damage bombo, like I think basically her max damage combo that like you'd see like Mirror Candle go for went from like about 3,700 to like 31, but that's only like one exact thing. And Arizona still has some stupid mix, some incredibly good screen control between her really safe normals and good block strings and really good dashing. She has, that was a funny interaction. She has very safe pressure from up close, and also can reset and go back into earlier parts of her block string, and with it still being very hard to contest. She still has fuzzies, which like people don't use too much, but that stuff, you know, unless I'm playing against like 3 people in particular, that will almost always open someone up. She still has her stomp rope stuff, which, you know, sometimes on paper you might look at it and be like, oh no, it's like mine, oh god, I don't know. But like, the whole point of this is kind of similar to like Paprika's pressure, where, you know, by themselves, these specials might not be safe, but it's a matter of the threat they carry with if you punish them, but they continue going forward. So if I do like stomp, you know, very basic one, not probably the best up close, but like if I do stomp A, let's say, and I've been doing stomp A at the end of my strings for like a hot second, so you're like, oh, okay, I can probably punish this. Let me just poke my 5A out. It's like 5 frames. It's so good. Stomp A is like not gonna, and then they stomp C. That's a pretty decent starter, and that's gonna hurt a lot. And then if you decide, okay, I'm gonna play a bit more offensive, blah, 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 like I have rope to deal with that, and then I have rope to cover like this giant circle around me, because rope's hitbox is like this wide rectangle, and if you get hit, doesn't matter where in that rectangle your hitbox is, if you're all the way to the left of it, all the way to the right of it, the rectangle doesn't care, it's still gonna grab you. So like, Arizona's ropes are still amazing, her stomps still give her incredible screen control and pressure. I think, like, in addition to those being her offense, her magic gives her one of the most terrifying disadvantage stages in the game. Her magic and her super, specifically. Because Arizona's magic, all 3 of them are reversals of a kind. You counters you, goes into a state where Arizona literally can't get hit. If you hit her and activate the counter, Deadbuck, Headbuck D, whatever you want to call it, Magic Headbuck, is a pretty decent starter. Gets a wall stick, which can lead to the rest of the combo if they know how to follow up on it, and it like gets her out of 1 hit of damage, which, you know, can be pretty important, especially up close pressure. And she also has her magic dash, which can let her get through. Well, I think her magic dash does let her get through projectiles. I think most zoners, like people who are playing Oleander or Velvet from afar, will be able to react to that with just a normal. It does prove incredibly useful in converting off of things like Deadbuck or Super. And like, she still has her short hop JC funny starter. She still has, you know, one thing I've seen a bit more here that we weren't seeing as much of in 1.0 is Headbuck AB Oki, which basically what you do as Arizona is you knock down someone with 2C, and then you Headbuck A and Headbuck B, at certain intervals to either cross them up or not cross them up, and then hit them, mix them 8 ways to Sunday, put them in the blender. And all of those like starters do a lot of damage, especially now that, mix and small combos in general are a lot more viable. That's like part of the reason why we're seeing these like headbutt AB Oki more is, it's pretty powerful. And even though they did nerf, so right here, Icebound actually illustrating a very important point. Even though they did nerf 6B's JD a bit, 6B into level 2 Stupor still does 1700 or so damage. So, all those tournaments in 1.0 where you're like, oh, wow, they almost got Candle in a corner or Bubble in a corner. They're like, haha, 6B level 2, and then they kill their opponent. That is still very possible, and I think that's one of the things that makes Arizona the singular most terrifying character in Disadvantage in this game. So, like, she might not have her bombos, but I'll be darned if she doesn't have everything else.
Okay, so thank you for the very detailed explanation. You pretty much explained the whole fundamental part of TFH, actually. My thoughts on her are really simple. This character is like pretty similar. I'm sure eventually Arizona players will get out of their emo phase, and that's all I have to say.
Oh my gosh.
This character, a lot of the different characters in 2.0 got like new tools or had very, very heavy changes to their original tools. There was nothing that needed to be changed about Arizona. The damage got touched, and this character still slaps. There was a point in time where people were saying that Arizona was awful now because her damage went down. That's very get real. That's very much so a lie. This patch is going to show, and this is more like something to say about the entire patch, but this patch is going to show that the way you play is more what matters rather than like the starter that you get or the damage that you can pump out. You actually have to have clean play. And like a clean Arizona still makes this character look good. A clean Arizona is still terrifying.
I'm not very real with you, Foxy.
Yeah.
I play Arizona when I don't want to think.
Shut up! I'm done.
Just 6B.
I tried to make this character. I don't play this character. 1.0, I didn't play this character Unga. In 2.0, whenever I play this character, I don't play her Unga.
That sounds like a you problem. What can I say?
That's not a problem.
I'm not saying you can't play her safe, but I'm saying if you're gonna go Unga, like, if you gotta choose an Unga character, like, I don't know.
You want to choose an Unga character? Pick Tap.
Okay, yeah.
Right,
yes, exactly.
We're actually already almost running out of time with this character. So, Amaron, can I get any thoughts from you? And then Zale.
She shares a lot of core mix-ups that Shanty does, actually. There's an argument to be made that Shanty JC is almost just like a better Airy JC.
Yep.
Because they both afford the characters the short hop JA fuzzies that you were talking about earlier. So Arizona's strength comes not so much from her normals, but from the fact that if she does get in on you, you're now playing the push block or get fuzzied game, or mash for your life game, which is, in my opinion, one of the most powerful states or forms of pressure in TFH, as you said earlier, because on top of all of this, you can still threaten throws really effectively.
Okay, Zale, if you want to wrap up any thoughts you might have on Arizona.
I didn't really mess with Arizona that much. I did learn her pretty much the basic level, intermediate level back in 1.0. And I did learn one of the headbutt loops at Java. So graciously provided to me. And it was fun to do, in actual matches. I actually streamed one time where I actually did the deadbuck loop in the corner against the Palm, I think it was, on my own channel. And I sent the clip to Java, and I was so proud of it. But as Arizona as a character, I feel like she definitely has her place even in 2.0. I just personally think that the system changes changed the way the fundamentals worked for the character, at least in terms of like damage optimization and resource gain and all that. It's the pre-block changes with her stomp though is very interesting because I feel like that in itself is an option select of sorts. Like you got either go for rope if they up back like 4D or 2D even if they backdash, or you can just go for like another stomp C or stomp A after stomp C. It's like a lot of options, I guess, and a lot of like force 50/50s. But yeah, that's a lot of force to have on Arizona at the moment.
Okay, and thank you. We're gonna go ahead and move on to Oleander. Amaron, why don't you start us off, and then Zale, why don't you go right after, and then we'll discuss from there.
Oleander. I can't think of a more controversial character in the history of TFH. Straight up. In 1.0, the vast majority of the player base disliked playing against Oleander immensely for very understandable reasons. She was meant to be, or I assume she was meant to be a kind of all-rounder character. But due to the lack of things that we have at the moment, like the input buffer and the changes to push block strength, one thing that we didn't cover earlier is that push block is now different depending on what normal you push block. That didn't used to always be the case. All this kind of combined into a character that played very keep away. And it was keep away that was very easy to loop into resources and loop into Fred. Fred is possibly the strongest win condition in the game because it affords Oleander very strong mix-ups that have very little risk behind them in the overall scheme of things. You need to go for really high commitment callouts in order to stop Oleander Fred mixes in general, and they can always be made safe. So that's kind of just like a summary of, 1.0 Oleander had a lot of tools that were seen as controversial, not easy to counterplay, and while I may disagree as an Oleander player, I can't disagree with the general consensus. In 2.0, Oleander had a rework for her game plan and design. Whereas in 1.0, you kind of went keep away, built up resources, and tried to get Fred. In 2.0, that doesn't quite work anymore. Due to changes she has, like double jumping from air sparks now having a vuln window, a lot more characters getting tools to like better anti-air or contest reads in neutral, means that you really have to play the stable game plan of stagger pressure, throw baits like other characters need to do. And in order to facilitate that, she got a lot of frame data changes. She got changes to her normals like 5B and 5C. They're now move her forwards. Her 6A now moves her forward to let her like reset her block string off of it better, and she plays a lot differently. Fred is still the win condition, and in a lot of ways you can argue that Fred got stronger than 1.0, but like the overall power level of characters has gotten so high in 2.0 that you can make an argument that it's okay. So she's in a very interesting and I think better place in 2.0. And before getting into more nuances, I want to see what Zale has to add onto it.
Hopping off of the 1.0 Oleander discussion, she definitely, like most of the player base, played more keep away and defensively with her, but I explored the offensive potential that 1.0 Oleander had, especially with like trap usage and setups with sparks and teleports and all that. And I feel like I was just in a limbo at a point where I felt like this character could be something else entirely instead of just keep away and zoning and defensive all the time. So I was under the impression with all these setups that I can come up with that I can develop a different playstyle for 1.0 Oleander. But then 2.0 came along and just facilitated my playstyle even more. And I just, like the pre-block changes especially, now you can't just up back Oleander to Oblivion and never get opened up. And with the first hit changes for the system changes, like exactly for you know, first hit bonuses for those damage values, trap setups and, you know, resets are actually more viable on that character than it ever was before in the history of TFH. And then once 2.0 came along, the whole game plan, like you said, just changed overall. I personally like the Fred changes. Like, you can't get another Fred during the you know, while he's out, and instead he extends his timer by a certain amount depending on what move you do and whether if it's charged or not. And it really like forces players to either take that risk or, you know, just hold it as long as possible to open her up.
Yeah, I'm kind of... I mean, I agree with pretty much everything that's been said by Zale and Amaron so far. In 1.0, I was pretty controversial for saying I thought she was a lot less stable than people gave her credit for. And I feel like 2.0 kind of evened out her stability just a bit more, because solo Oleander stagger pressure is a lot better. Her neutrals also hit in some places, buffed in others, like the 6A Pillar of Truth and air teleports being nerfed. But I also think Fred is a more decisive win condition. Prior to the bug fix for first hit JD on Fred, I actually probably would have said she was the weakest character in the game. But that bug fix alone was so huge that I definitely don't think that anymore. Because you can't just sleep delay tech your way through Fred and eat so much of the timer now. Like, even if I manage my JD well, I'm still going to be getting hit really hard in Fred. And I think that that's a interesting dynamic, because it is harder for her to get Fred overall. I would actually say the system works against her, but Fred's also more decisive on his own. So for that reason, I actually think she's a lot more dynamic to play against, which honestly is the most important thing to me.
Yeah, with the advent of instant blocking, people are becoming more aware of counterplay that had always existed but wasn't necessarily easily accessible because of the input buffer, where now if you IB sparks from Oleander, you can very much take your turn, if not punish her, if they're point blank.
Yeah.
So a lot of system mechanics, Oleander's in an interesting spot right now because a lot of the changes to universal mechanics in 2.0, you can argue made counterplaying her easier than it did in 1.0. You can very decently contest reads in neutral. You can more characters have access to anti-airs. Her JB got nerfed, which makes her even more susceptible to anti-air than she was in 1.0. And all this kind of leads to a character that, if the only way that she's opening you up is with throws and light normals, she's going to need to put in a lot of work to close out the round, just because her average damage off of her normals and throws is
I reckon you're in for a wrecking.
possibly the weakest among the cast. But in turn, she has kind of Fred to make up for that. So you can elect to play slow and steady and resource build for the decisive factor of Fred, or you can do your best to now condition the opponent and entice them to make critical mistakes so you can get like high damage openers, like, you know, a 5C starter or a 6A starter or something like that. And I know the other day, like, for example, you were commenting how I was going for air reset traps on Oleander. And that's because of, you know, the buffs afforded to her, like her new 6A and 2B. You can actually do some pretty messed up air tech setups if the character doesn't really have a lot of aerial mobility to combat it. And you kind of need to look at Oleander just differently in how you get things done at the moment in 2.0. And that took me a while to come to terms with, because initially I was like, I don't know what to do with this character anymore. I can't compete with like Paprika or Shanty's damage. And the truth of the matter is Oleander's a character where you kind of need to have control of the flow of the match to succeed. That's just the kind of character she is. And if you play the character, you need to accept that. And, you know, you also accept all the positives that come with that.
And you're welcome for those air tech resets, Amaron.
I was doing those well
about
before
those-
you, buckaroo.
Sure, sure you
we're
have.
Actually, we're like almost out of time. We're like almost out of time on this. Is there any final thoughts from either of you, Foxy or Java? I'd keep them fairly brief if you can.
Y'all are in for a
All these block strings mad spooky.
These are a few of my favorite
Yeah.
things.
I like the fact that
Stop
she's
it and
forced.
kick it.
I like the fact that she was nudged to play on the ground just a little bit more. I can actually fight her now.
Okay. Great. So why don't we go ahead and move on to Palm, which is going to be another Java Morris discussion. So whenever you have a second, Java, if you want to give us the rundown on Palm, because this is a character you like been grinding out of nowhere recently. You have advanced a
Yeah.
significant amount, which is frustrating.
It was a meme! It was a meme! What happened?
Oh my god.
Oh my gosh. Every time like Amaron does something like that, I think about how in 1.0 he'd be like, you know, when Java first did the headbutt loops on me, he'd apologize. He'd be like, oh, sorry.
I've trained years
that.
for this. You will not
And now he
dissuade
just
me.
does it without remorse, and I feel like I'm getting oh, dude. Tom
I have a
has
no remorse.
some. Oh my god. Palm. Okay, so let's go over the changes of Palm real quick, and I'll talk about my feelings on her. I think Palm 1.0 had some pretty nutty bombos. They're a little bit different given how Juggle Decay both the changes to Juggle Decay Gravity and to Hit Stop. If you don't know what those terms mean, don't worry. It just means it's easier to drop stuff at the end of a combo. Made her like big bombos not quite as good as they were, including how they changed damage scaling. But I don't think that was really her best aspect to begin with. So they also they significantly changed how Chopper works. That's the flying dog. Chopper now doesn't ground bounce, he instead tumbles you towards whichever direction he hits you at, so it can help like one cool thing you can get from that is full screen conversions, but because of him not also tracking as well, it's not really something I mess with. So while I think he's not quite as good in 1.0, I won't say that definitively. I just don't mess with it as much. However, Bitey and Mama were both significantly buffed, so I'm going to talk about those. Bitey, his low attack now has a low profile. So much of a low profile that can go under moves, literally any move that doesn't touch the ground, such as Oleander's 5A, one of my favorite ones to go on. And it also goes much, much, much further. So Bitey Mix is really good right now. And that in addition to how, so like there are certain people like Hammett, for example, great example of this. He would go for a reset heavy style of Palm, because Palm, even though there is some unblockable and left-right protection in this game, I would say she still has the scariest mix in this game, even with that in mind. Hammett was a good example of that in 1.0 and would play a very reset heavy style. And given how combos in this game in general are more front-ended, it generally benefits how Palm would go for like, 1000 damage, JV start or whatever, hard knockdown, go for that kind of stuff repeatedly, benefits you a lot more in 2.0 than in 1.0. Also, Mom got the heck buffed out of her. One, they bug fixed the problem where she would take damage during her armor. So now on her bite and her grab, she has 1 hit of armor that doesn't take away from her health. So you have to hit her twice to knock her out of either of those. And her counter, once activated, has infinite armor, which is really funny, especially because her counter, when activated, it doesn't count. So, quick thing, when you hit a dog, normally it counts as a hit, which means like you can, off of things like 6A, where you can only cancel into a jump on hit, you can jump cancel off of 6Aing a dog. The only, there might be 2 exceptions to that, but the main exception is with Mama's counter. If you 6A that counts as a block, so you're just getting countered. But that also reaches half screen and is a bark with the same properties as Palm's bark, which means that if you put Mama relatively close to Oleander, and you press 4 or 6D, if Oleander isn't ready, she will get barked, and the bark is incredibly fast after Mama gets hit. The startup is like instant, just like the other Arizona's counter, and the activation is much faster than Arizona's counter. It's very scary. So that's really good. There's also like, I mean, honestly, those 2 buffs helped a lot, but I feel like a lot of it is just was already part of Palm's kit to begin with. Palm's JB is a war crime. The fact that she has that JB and 2 air dashes effectively. She has float and a normal air dash. Both of those work the same way, just with different trajectories and different things, but they both work as cancels. So what I can do is I can do, let's say I knock you down, I summon a Bitey. I can do the following. I can do JB. I can do JB with Bitey. I can do JB into JC whiff into grab, which is unmashable. I can do JB into float JB. I can do JB into float JB into float JB. I can do JB into float JB into Bitey into float JB. I can do a lot of things with Palm, and Palm like has had most of that, and they only made the dogs that enable that kind of stuff much better outside of Chopper. And I feel like Chopper wasn't already the best to begin with. I think Bitey is probably, you know, even at 1.0, I think was still her most solid dog. And now with Mama being an actual somewhat viable dog, Mama's still essentially, Mama, in my opinion, should only be used when you either have a super to cover the time it takes to get your 3 magic back, because Palm's magic works in that every dog costs a certain amount of magic. And when you have Mama out, you can't summon another dog because she uses all your magic, which makes it so that Palm's block string can't go past 5A without being punishable with the jab. So that's like kind of spooky on its own, which is why you need to like cover it with a super or something after you use up all of Mama's stuff. But like, oh my gosh, Mama has like tick throw loops, which are really funny. Her counter is honestly one of the like silliest things out there, and Mama's what is it? Mama also develops collision whenever she's hit. So if someone like tries to combo you while you're on the other side of Mama,
if you could just wrap up this explanation, because we're actually almost out of time with this character, and I want to give everyone a chance to speak about her.
Of course. Basically, Palm's really good. She's always been really good, but they buffed Bitey and Mama significantly, which makes her very, very good.
I have one thing to say about this character, and is that Palm players held back this character. It should not have taken Java to pick up this character for me to feel threatened by her. Okay, that's all.
Go for it, Zale.
I have messed with Palm as well, just a little bit though, even considering like swapping mains there. Speaking of body and like you know, her that enables her JB setups and mix-ups, I feel like there wasn't really much exploration because other Palm players neglected to use, you know, outside of Hammett, of course, neglected to use Bitey and Mama a bit more on the offensive side. And to add on to the Mama discussion, I feel like she's really good for locking down an opponent in the corner, especially because you have a threat of counter.
Insane.
Mama's chip is
Yes, it is very insane.
The interesting thing is now with the advent of input buffer Palm has kits or has tools like 2B in her kit that no other character really has access to in the same way. Palm's 2B is a pancake normal. It flattens her hurt box to the ground so low that most ground normals in this game will just whiff. So,
Like Ollie 5.
like Ollie 5A, like Paprika 5B, like a lot of characters normals. So she has possibly the best challenge and mash out button in the game with 2B. And because of its properties, possibly the best non-6A anti-air in the game. So it's interesting to see how like Palms will continue to develop and use tools like 2B because she's already has things in her kit like Bork and Super, level 1 Super to just enable so many things. If Palm does Bork into Super, it's basically her turn for the next like 3-4 seconds of the game.
Yeah, her level 1 is like the best utility super in the game. For like a level 1. I think it's so versatile and it can put you in a better position or secure an already good position for you. And I think that's valuable.
It's basically expensive neutral.
Yeah.
It is.
The only like sus thing I personally have with Palm is Mama Dog gaining collision and preventing you from capitalizing on punish combos.
Oh, no hiding Palm.
No hiding
Yeah,
Palm.
no
And
hiding.
the layers.
The layering is actually
the
so
thing
messed up.
too. The other only thing is I think using dogs to eat hits is incredibly powerful. If you're jumping at a person but you throw an active dog in their face, that dog will stop their hitbox before it reaches Palm. And that is an incredibly powerful asset to have when you're trying to make your way in.
Especially
Sorry,
like
I was just gonna say if we can get final thoughts from anyone who wants to talk about Palm, so we can move to the next character. Thank you.
I was gonna add on to the
You go, Zale. I've already talked about it.
I was gonna add on to like the eating hitboxes thing. The way, especially in the Oleander matchup, the way that Oleander's hitboxes work, it's like a progressive hitbox. So it's not like all out at the same time, like 5C and 5B, for example, and 2C. Once that hitbox hits something, it's gone, even if the move just keeps going. So it is really powerful, especially in that instance. You can go ahead, Jabba.
Okay, I just want one last thing, incredibly important with Palm that I feel like not a lot of people are doing in 1.0, and still not a lot of people now, is if you put Bitey behind your opponent while you're in block, they can't do almost anything. They just have to wait or move. Having Bitey while you're in block, all you need is one frame where you're not in block stun to press Bitey, and they get hit. Incredible.
Yeah. You can't do stagger pressure the same way it gets. I was actually just gonna say, sorry guys, we have K9 is here, so K9 if you want to say hello. She's finally here.
What's up, little gamer?
Anyway, it was really good discussion on Palm. We're gonna go ahead and move to Tien now, which I'll start with, and then we only have 2 characters left after that, and then we'll do chat questions, so we're past the halfway mark. Anyway, so Tien is interesting because I play Tien very differently from most other Tien hosts, and the style that I play specifically got super buffed. Almost none of the nerfs to her changed the way I played her. In fact, the flight cancel change for me personally is a huge buff, because it's a better disengage tool, and there's a lot more ways I can incentivize people to commit while I'm on offense. So I've done a lot with her. The level 2 change was big for a lot of people. I'm personally still in the camp that it's mostly used for a magic refill tool, but I'm not actively punished for using it. Although you do have the option of looping HKDs and going into Ash loops for more damage if that is something you want to do, which is something I've started to do as well. So Tien, I think, got pretty much overall buffed. Just having more explosive potential is really good. Her offense is like still the same. She plays the way that 2.0 incentivizes you to play very well. It was never any different. Her ground game is still ridiculous. I don't think she has a hard matchup in this game. I think she does pretty okay versus everyone. Maybe like some slight variety, but it doesn't feel too bad. Yeah, Tien's just really good. Like, I would say she might, I don't know, she definitely got buffed overall. She's definitely a strong character, but as we kind of talked about with Holy, the power level of the game went up as well. And with that, I think she might be on the lower end of characters, but I think what she does is still incredibly effective. It's incredibly safe. It's incredibly good. There's a lot of variety in how you can approach things with her. And I really think the only weakness, obviously, is that her damage on average is a lot lower, which I think is fine. And V-Dash is a new tool that gives you a lot of new ways to start turns. It's definitely not looking to be a mix-up tool, at least not in developed play and not in low-paying/offline. But it is an incredibly good turn starter. It does give her an additional movement option. It's also a really nice response to push block. Like if I poke someone with max range 5B in neutral, now I can do V-Dash to start my turn, which is awesome. I didn't really have that before. And if it hits, it hits. That's cool too. It's a pretty good starter. The magic refund makes it fun in combos. But yeah, Tien's still incredibly good. I thought she was incredibly good at 1.0.
That was a pretty mirrored sentiment. I can offer some thoughts about fighting against Tien if you're done with what you want to say, Grunkle.
Go for it.
Tien is strong because we mentioned it before, but the ability to control how your opponent push blocks is very powerful in TFH.
Yes.
And because Tien has access to a incredibly fast and safe overhead in a lot of circumstances through flip into JB, for example, that puts a desire on the opponent to want to absolute guard because, you know, on top of flip JB, Tien has access to all the normal pressure tools of resetting pressure, running up into throw, staggering. So all of that combines with a, you know, an overhead in the vein of flip JB makes it very enticing to want to absolute guard Tien. And just to make sure everybody's following, absolute guard is when you push block while blocking a direction, and then during the push block you hold the other direction. So you push block while blocking low, and then while push block is occurring, you block high. And that'll make you block both low and high at the same time. In that sense, she's incredibly powerful. And one issue is that a lot of TNs kind of focus on her aerial engagement tools, which are fine and strong, but she has some of the best grounded normals in the game, which Grunkle uses to a lot of great effect. And she is a character where, you know, if you are on top of your game and in the opponent's head, she'll kind of open you up.
Round two.
Absolutely.
Fight.
And I guess to like build off of that, she does have, I think the most interesting thing to Tien is she has the counterplay there if you're willing to progress the game to that level. With the advent again of the different levels of push block and the advent of the input buffer and IB, now you can do something that I personally refer to as active defense, where you try to condition your opponent that you're going to push block or mash in a specific place and then kind of like outplay it. Because for example, if a TN resets her string to dash in when she thinks you're going to push block, that's the perfect opportunity to mash. And this isn't, go for it.
I just want to jump in, Amaron. What you described is literally the core offense defense game of TFH.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you'll see, like at the lower level or, you know, more mid-level play, it's not really something that's actively considered. Most people just kind of push block to get the character away or try to get them to like whiff something so then they can whiff punish it. But one important thing to like start developing in game plans at the higher level is, baiting offensive responses, making the opponent think that you're going to push block in a specific place, but you IB and mash, for example. So characters did get stronger, pressure is scarier, damage is higher, but the interactivity of the game has never been better, in my opinion.
And for Tien, she just plays she plays TFH so well. I don't know what else to say. She I can't even really think of a weakness of this character other than her 2A is a lot slower and her damage is lower on average, which obviously it has to be that way because good God, if you give this character more damage, it's a nightmare.
Round one.
Yeah, absolutely.
To add on to that, I think it's not really like a weakness, it's more like a trade-off, but her magic options feel a lot more committal in 2.0 than it did 1.0.
3D?
Yeah, basically 70 can be used as a reversal, can be used as like a mix-up tool, disengage, all three of those things. There's 3D. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if I could touch on those, 3D got nerfed, and thank goodness, because it was messed up. 70 is pretty much the same, where like it can be a get me out tool. It just kind of puts you in a scramble situation after, since you can't block on the way down or you have to air dash.
Yeah, and punishes are harder.
Yeah.
Back to business.
But it's still, it's still a solid defensive tool. You benefit from showing it here and there.
Oh, was that it, Zale?
Yeah, I don't really have much to say. I haven't actually. Tien's like neutral presence and her counterplay potential is like pretty high, I would say, with the anti-air set he has access to, as well as being able to contest the air very well with the airs and their super jump fly. There's too many TNs. This is like a personal pet peeve of mine, but there's too many TN roles that use super jump fly almost exclusively in neutral. She definitely has a ground game, and Grunkle can attest to that. And it is very hard to open them up.
Dude, I think her ground game is like the thing that is important. But the aerial option should be, in my opinion, should be used as a supplement. Like, it shouldn't be the baseline, because especially in this patch, I think characters have just gotten more tools against super jump fly in general. But already, like, I felt like at the top level, people were disengaging from that very consistently. Like, I can't get away with that against players like Amaron or K9 or Java or Mida. Like, I can't get away with it because I'm just gonna get punished, and it's like, if they disengage, it's kind of a neutral outcome. I give up some of the space I've gained. I'm not getting anything out of it. In level 2, it's a little bit different, but like, I've always felt that her ground game was the thing that should be focused on, because her dash block on top of everything else is just completely ridiculous. It's so good.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, her ground game has been probably I guess one of the best in a way, because of her dash being able to like low profile a lot of things. So it's like amazing against zoners, in my personal opinion. And like, I don't know, her neutral buttons like 5B, 2B, and everything like that are just very, very good. And she has a lot of anti-airs, like you were saying before. Like, I don't know, personally, I feel like it should not have taken 10 players this long, nor it should not have taken Grunkle in order for 10 players to actually understand her strengths, because she is very strong. It's just that like, players are just playing her more aerial and they're getting more anti-air, because like, that's what happens when you play aerial and you focus on nothing but like just jumping all the time. Like, there's strength in her ground game that people are just not seeing, and they're just not representing, like resetting pressure strings and everything like that. That's all I wanted to add.
Yeah, so we have to wrap up this topic unless anyone has any final thoughts.
Yes, I do have a final thought. Level 2 Ash damage is kind of sus. That's all I have to say.
I completely agree. I do not like level 2 Ash, even though it's on my character. I just like, it aggravates me when I use it and when other people use it. Anyway, yeah, I think that explosive potential is really good for her to have now, because obviously it wasn't really there to the same degree in 1.0 with level 2. Anyway,
Round two.
K9, now that you're here, why don't you open up with your thoughts on Velvet this time?
I think Velvet is the zoner she was meant to be in 1.0. They fixed basically all my issues I had with her. Like, DP is -2 now, but it's actually understandable considering how everything else works now. Because he now has access to legitimate zoning tools. Wind is fixed, like it actually pushes the opponent away. It's not necessarily something to like in like a go-to or anything in like every single matchup or in every single way, but like it is a thing that actually works now, so I'm very happy about that. Velvet 5B is actually a very good stagger tool now because you can now not be push blocked out of it and punished at any point in your string. Like they fixed the push block, so now Velvet actually works with staggers and everything like that. And I don't know, 5B is just a very good button to end on and just to reset pressure. It's just it does a lot of things now that it's very much disjointed and actually works. Her chip damage also got buffed, so that's very, very good for her because back in 1.0 her chip damage did almost it didn't do anything basically. Like the only time you actually see like a Velvet chipping out is when like they were already basically dead to begin with. Like they had the lowest health possible, or it was just like Oleander versus Velvet basically. Like her chip damage was almost not negligible. And they also buffed some, I'm still kind of questioning buttons like 2C and 5C. The damage on those starters are actually like insane with their yeah.
Dude, I
highest
by 2C
normal
and I
game.
vaporize. It's scary.
Yeah, like she's supposed to be like scary with anti-airs and everything like that, but I don't necessarily know if I like that direction of like buffing 2C and 5C that much because like she does need to get in like at certain points, but I don't know if that's necessarily the way. That's a little too punishing in my opinion. Like the max damage she gets off of it is basically the same from 1.0. It's just that like getting counter hit by 2C and 5C like those hits are just so much more meaningful now. Let's see what else did I get changed. Oh yeah, her level 2 now has an interesting change with wind because beforehand wind didn't necessarily affect it at all, but now in her level 2 state wind loops actually don't give like any JD, so wind loops are actually way more volatile in level 2 state and in general, so you can waste less magic and do around the same damage as snowflake loops. So I think that's a very, very good thing. Overall, this character just got good things overall and some questionable things, I think. That's all from me.
I personally just feel that playing against Velvet is exactly the same for me in terms of what I think about. It's just that I get punished harder. Like, I don't feel like Velvet's really doing anything different to me. I think probably the 5B change is the biggest one, but it's mostly just punishment and numbers at play.
Basically.
For me, I feel like the 2C being a incredibly good anti-air in addition to, I think, her literal best starter is kind of wild. But I think Velvet's scariest change is how 5B makes her blocks. 5B, in addition to Eruption, gives her the scariest block strings on God. Like, oh my gosh. The way, like, K9 especially is very, very comfortable with using those in conjunction with, like, every other Velvet tool in the universe. And when she gets her pressure going, you're just like, if you try to push block at certain times, you literally explode. If you try to mash, unless you know exactly what you're doing, you literally explode. It's like incredibly good. And if you just block, like Eruption does a ton of chip now. It actually doubled in chip damage from 45 to 90. So it's kind of spooky. But yeah, I
Yeah, the
think
scary part of
Velvet's a much better
Velvet.
character now.
The scary part of Velvet is definitely the damage and chip changes because it's made challenging her incredibly more risky because like you said, if she does hit you, most of her like damage starters are pretty good now. Because she has access to tools like a low profiling 2C, she can employ the same concepts that we touched on with Palm 2B, where you can set up situations that make the opponent want to mash and do things like backdash into 2C and just completely punish them or counter hit them in a lot of situations. So she definitely got a lot stronger in just pure, you know, strike throw tools on top of her zoning.
Yeah. Also, just one more thing, like a lot of exploration on how to actually jab out of Velvet Strings needs to be explored because there are a lot of holes, and I necessarily haven't need to explain where the holes are because like there's just a way you can just avoid Velvet pressure in general in 1.0, so I didn't necessarily have to explain too much, but now I think I need to take more emphasis in actually explaining what's going on with her staggers and everything like that.
To touch on to the, you know, her tools and neutral presence, I feel like it's always been a mind game against that matchup for any character, but in 2.0 it puts a lot more emphasis on getting in and staying, and thanks to her like chip damage buffs as well as, you know, the pre-block changes. Velvet can employ and condition certain reactions from a player, especially if they're overly defensive or even overly offensive, with her low-key options and wake-up options as well. And I don't know where this came from, but suddenly one day Velvet's just started backdashing 6Aing me, and I just was so surprised, like, oh, you're gonna anti-air me now, are you? Then I try to go on the ground, then they DP me. I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm just gonna like try to bait a throw, and that's what that worked. But for some time, even then, the backdashes and, you know, the mind game and all that is very strong in that matchup, where he can facilitate what you do. Basically, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, go on, Grunkle.
I was just gonna say, my only point of iffyness with Velvet is I think her meter gain might be a little too high for the kind of patch 2.0 is, but I would also be like, I wouldn't be particularly phased if it just stayed like this. Because like I'm fine with her deleting me for counter hitting me with 5C. Since she like doesn't have a real low besides her option, I'm okay with that. It's mostly just, I think, both playing to deny her meter and like denying her meter in general is really hard. And there's also a lot of DP, or there's a lot of combos that specifically focus on building using that, which up her comeback potential.
She's one of the only characters who can build a full bar off of the combo.
Yeah.
Because I was exploring this the other day because I might have posted something on Twitter and I was like, how the heck? Because there's there's meter build combos you can do where you hit them with DP a bunch of times, and normally when you're using moves like Paprika JC, where it does multi-hits, or Palm JB, normals have scaled meter gain for multi-hit moves. So instead of gaining 5 meter points per hit, I think it's something like 2. So like something that does 3 hits would gain you, or no, it's like 2 or 3, but basically it's less, like significantly less. However, with specials, that does not apply. So when you're doing something like Velvet DP repeatedly in a combo, you're getting 15 points of meter per DP, as opposed to 9, which is a huge difference. And especially because DP is like relatively JP efficient, it's kind of spooky. But like, I think it will be very interesting to see how people really push certain aspects of Velvet stuff right now, because I think I think they buffed a lot of her different things, and some of them might be overtuned. Like to the point where she can both zone and kind of play like very aggressively and get rewarded for both kind of equally, and it's we'll see how it goes. But I do think she should be like a good character, but I don't agree with certain aspects of it right now. So that's just me.
The only main point of contention I have with Velvet is how Grunkle said it earlier, but how much she has access to tools like cross canter. Because for a lot of other characters that don't have good defensive options, the choice to use cross canter comes with the knowledge that you are cutting your comeback potential because you're using up your incredibly valuable meter. Due to just how much meter Velvet generally gains, I'm a little bit sus on her ability to cross canter as much as she does at the moment, but beyond that, it's nothing that hasn't been said already.
We gotta wrap up Velvet, so if you have any quick final thoughts, please say.
That's
That
it.
was perfect.
I think I'm good. Yeah.
Round 2.
Okay.
Fight.
Well, since we have you here, K9, we're gonna. Why don't you talk about the next character? This is our last character discussion. Then we'll do some chat questions, really quick, and then we'll wrap up. K9, why don't you tell us your thoughts about your thoughts on Paprika?
Pretty good. You guys already did Chanty? Gotcha.
Yeah, sorry.
No, you're good. I think Paprika is definitely very much good and on the higher end of things. It's just that Paprika players are still playing kind of wild, so like there's no way to truly gauge her power until like somebody like truly shows it like enough times. But like I believe Paprika is definitely on the stronger end. Like her mix is extremely good. She has the ability to stay in push block very well. It's just that there's still a little bit of uncertainty with players on how to like stagger and both like how to actually mix safely and effectively. A lot of things got buffed for Paprika. One of the biggest things is like her damage output. She does crazy damage now, like especially for her silly things. She does insane amount of insane amount of damage now. One thing, I don't know, like another thing that definitely should get toned down in my opinion is Basket Burst alongside like another like Basket Burst on its own is like an enigma at the moment. Like there's a lot of uncertainty. Yeah. There's a lot of uncertainty to blocking it right now, and it does too much counter hit damage. Like if you're getting hit with a basket starter, you're just exploding, and I am not okay with that in any sense. But what else am I gonna say? A lot of her tools, like flop isn't necessarily a good anti-air or a good wake-up button, but it's a very good ender. Like it gives her access to hard knockdown, which she didn't have before. So now she can better like mix off of command grab, because once people like did command grab, it was kind of like you cast in all your damage basically, or you just like try to reset into like a t-shirt, which like gave a little bit of uncertainty. But now like flop actually gives her access to like doing a different ender and different routes and like getting better damage routes off of it. Like it's very, very nice. Paprika, I believe, is very, very on the higher end of things in my opinion. Okay, you guys can go.
So I actually feel pretty strongly about two of Paprika's things this patch. As I mean, with how K9 has played Paprika and like when I've played her recently, when she's played other people I've seen recently, Paprika has very, very good like fuzzies and mix-ups up close. However, I think Paprika gets incredibly well rewarded for just throwing out really unsafe things, because she really only needs like 2.5 of those to hit out of the entire round. And since she's one of the highest health pool characters in the game, she can kind of get away with that to an extent. But one thing that I think is actually like will not be touched, like, is basket. people didn't explore basket much, and I spent like many hours the other day like messing around with it and seeing exactly how it works. And essentially, I can like, I don't know why they haven't been doing this, because basket raw, and even like basket raw without counter hit, does like 1500 to like 2000 damage, which is insane for one hit, or for like just one guess. And Paprika's basket hitting you left or right depends mostly on her positioning before she teleports. And I mean, it would literally take 30 minutes for me to go over how exactly
Yeah,
it
I was
works.
gonna say,
But
please
basically,
just give us the
It
short.
depends on Paprika's
she can do
soul.
a left-right off of like a few frames of a micro dash, and if you guess wrong, based off of her positioning only, your positioning does not matter relative to the basket for this, because it would be a meaty knockdown. I can do a setup where if I do a micro dash or I don't do a micro dash, determines whether or not you take 2000 plus damage, and that is complete like silliness. And even though people haven't really been using it much, the fact that it's there and that like it's in the game, people can use it, is messed up, and I really think that needs to be touched. But yeah, that's
So
my thing.
I stepped out for a second. So I agree, basket should be looked into just for that specific thing. I feel like obviously Paprika got buffs overall, and the system benefited her overall. I don't think there's any dispute on that. The first hit damage changes especially buff her a lot. I feel like she was given a lot more comeback potential just because flop HKD is really good, and HKDs in general are actually viable this patch, where they were pretty suspicious in the first or in 1.0. I think flop is a really good addition to her. I personally like it because it gives me more things to bait against the Paprika, who's like too aggressive about pressing it. I also think that the level of play with Paprika probably is a side effect of the 2.0 system changes we've talked about. Like from the top, Paprika players has gone up a lot, and I think that that's a really good sign in general. I like that people are actually using command throw now. It really felt like there was only one Paprika using it in 1.0, and now it feels like more of them are starting to understand how to layer in pressure, because that tool is really good. It removes so much JD, and like I didn't realize how much till we got that negative JD indicator.
It's a lot.
It is a lot. There's the interesting about Paprika is her neutral feels strange in the way that some players approach it from my perspective. A lot of Paprikas dislike the Oleander matchup because, you know, you can make the argument that Oleander can just continuously zone and put out epilogue and stuff like that, and there's nothing the Paprika player can do. But the truth of the matter is Paprika has some of the best grounded buttons in the game. Maybe arguably like second best or something like that. And being able to leverage your movement and those buttons to contest things like an Oleander trying to read in neutral is very important, because as discussed earlier, the actual damage reward and Oki setups, and you know, if Paprika gets you to the corner and puts like a gift on top of you, that's locking out your A button as a reversal option, which is incredibly powerful actually. So I'm very interested to see how this character will develop in 2.0, especially now that we're seeing like really strong fuzzy setups come out from players like K9.
Yeah.
Paprika.
I think it's
like honest. I think her starters being as good as they are is going to hold the development back a lot.
yeah, I mean, yeah, like Cart C being so enticing because it is like a Gigantamax starter.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Gigantamax starter.
Dude,
Dude, I got counter hit by Tim. Like counter hit me with Cart
Oh,
C
man.
2 meters, and I actually lost like 80%. I could not believe it.
Yeah, that's a lot of
like,
damage.
It's better than Velvet like 5C and TC. Like, it's insane.
Yeah.
And it's
The interesting The interesting thing is Paprika is one of the characters that gets access to, I don't know, what I lovingly dub YOLO mix, where you can do something incredibly unsafe, but you still have access to super to layer behind it.
Yeah,
And
800 or so.
yeah, so the thing is, when other characters do it, like let's say an Arizona level 1 Zoo, unless she has level 2, that's kind of the end of the interaction. It's a lot of damage, but that's kind of the end of it. Paprika gets
Go.
hard knockdown, which is one of the best states in the game for her. So her YOLO mix is mad scary.
Very rewarding. I mean, she gets access to command throw,
Round one.
short hop JA cross up, short hop JC cross ups, obviously 2A, which is the thing you should represent the most, by the way. Like,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think it's more Paprika. She can snowball a lot harder off of her high commitments, which I think is like, well, one, it's very enticing for the Paprika players, obviously, but two, it can make closing out rounds against her very stressful, for sure. Like, I definitely think about Pap Super a lot differently than I do, or I don't know about differently, but I definitely feel like I'm at the biggest risk of losing the game if I get hit by Paprika Super, which I don't even really feel that way against Arizona for some, depending on the resource state, because I feel like Arizona needs, how do I say this, like, Arizona needs more interactions
Round two.
depending on her resource state to
Yeah.
run it back all the way, which sometimes means she needs less touches, but I feel like Paprika can consistently 3-touch me in that position.
I
God
think
forbid
you
I get
have
hit by,
much
like,
better
Foxy.
damage potential than Arizona this patch in terms of just touch count.
Yeah, I completely agree. We're actually about out of time. Does anyone have any final thoughts on Paprika?
And that is it. Paprika's
Funny
very
character.
good. Very
Oh,
good
can
game.
okay. There's this one weird instance. I'm not sure if it's intentional or not, but the way the projectiles work on Paprika,
KO.
especially if they try to set up like a pot above you
Favorite thing.
while you're in the corner, and they try to do like a command draw setup or a whiff punish setup, basically. They're like, once you hit the Paprika, the hitbox on the pot or whatever projectile is on screen just goes away completely.
Yeah.
But if it's a fruit, it'll stay on screen. So it's a very weird interaction where you'd have to call out and basically guess which option feels right in that moment.
Yeah, Paprika mix is very, very strong, especially in the corner. Like, it's extremely strong. Locking out a button with fruit and gifts is just like, it's so annoying to deal with and so very strong.
She has some of the strongest offensive cross canter usage in the game, arguably.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that.
I wonder if
Because-
cross countering someone off a basket in how well that would work. So just,
Oh no.
Just for listeners, for context, when you cross canter and the opponent just does a normal tech, immediate normal tech on wake up, you are at worst +9. So you can absolutely set things up with an offensive cross canter, just to keep them in the corner.
Yeah. Okay, we gotta wrap up Paprika. Good conversation though. I feel like she's one of them. Like, I don't know about most controversial, but she's definitely one of the most changed characters this patch just in general.
Ready?
Anyway, so we've got about 10 minutes left. Prior to this, I collected some questions from people on Twitter. So what we're gonna do is we got 4 of them. I'm gonna read the question. One of them is actually 2 questions, so I guess that's cheating. We'll just do both of them separately. I'm gonna read it, and I guess we'll just start with the order of the call. So K9, you can give a response. Amaron, you can give a response. I'll give a response. Java gives a response. Zale gives a response. We move to the next one. Sound good?
Okay.
Okay. So Saipuki asks, there's actually 2 questions. So let's start with the first one. Do you think Oleander is still OP in 2.0 even with nerfs? Which I feel like we've covered already.
No, I don't think she's like overpowered in any sense. I just think she's structured very well now. That's kind of it on my thoughts. Like,
Yeah, okay.
I mean, I have the Ollie main bias, obviously, but I agree that it depends on your definition of overpowered, because solo and base Ollie, while is a lot more stable, still has like pretty active weaknesses for damage and whatnot. But if you get Fred out, you can make some of the worst situations in the game happen, like bar none. So if that's your, definition of a strong character, like they need resources and like a game state, then sure. But overall, I don't think that she's an overpowered character. I think she is incredibly fine in 2.0.
I'm gonna say I mentioned earlier I thought she might have been the weakest character in the game prior to the Fred JD bug fix, but since that's been done with, I think she's really good. I definitely don't think she's OP though. I don't want to like bring up tier list stuff because obviously we're not really in a stage of the game of 2.0's life to talk about that. But she would not be my pick for like a top 2 character.
yeah, no, not at all. Not with Shanty existing.
Yeah, Fred is good, but he's still locked behind 2 meters.
For my thoughts on Oleander, I think Oleander, base Oleander, we'll talk about base and Fred different because I think they're 2 entirely different characters. Base Oleander is, I think, much more enjoyable for both parties to play against, because it's not just like, funny base part. Like, because, she has real block string, much better block string options now, at least, especially with 6B. Very interesting stuff. But I think Fred mix, while you don't have quite the amount of Fred bombos, Fred having the JD reduction at the start that he does now allows for Fred mix that is like up there with some of the most unreactable, like, guess stuff, even offline mix, like, possible in this game. It is very good, and like players like Amaron especially use it incredibly well. So I think Fred, while he doesn't have his bombos, he has a really good mix. But I don't think that would go and make Oleander OP. I think for right now, Amaron's just really good at the video
Yeah,
game.
I think Amaron's just like in contention for best player in the game at the moment.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, your turn, Zale.
I never thought Oleander was overpowered. Fred in 1.0, however, I did think was a little overtuned, especially since you could get another Fred during that Fred, and you would either force the opponent to approach you while you have Fred out because you have the threat of reading and gaining more resources, or you put them in a very messed up situation where you mix them up, but then potentially like ending the round or game depending on the resources. But base Oleander 1.0 wasn't all that threatening. She was like I said before, most players were focused on keep away and just zoning out, while I took a different approach with trap setups and offensive potential. But in 2.0, I feel like the balancing like scaling changed, where both base Oleander and Fred are in a very good spot at the moment.
Great. So I'm actually gonna direct this next one straight to K9 because she hasn't gotten a chance to speak about Shanty yet. But Pookie also asked, what are Shanty's best and worst matchups?
I believe Shanty's best matchup, in my personal opinion, is Velvet. Because the way she can snowball Velvet on top of giving Velvet little meter is absolutely insane. She is definitely the pick if you want to like destroy a Velvet main, like, to be honest. Like, I don't know, Shanty is a character who is very much up there, probably first or second in the game. I think Arizona's still probably the best in the game, but Shanty is not far behind. But her worst matchup would have to be, I'm thinking it's probably Paprika, with the amount of like control, like her 5B basically controls so much space, and Shanty doesn't have necessarily the best tools to deal with her ranged buttons. And plus, Paprika just kind of explodes Shanty with her being on the like lower end of health and everything like that. Like, I'm pretty sure Paprika is probably Shanty's worst matchup at the moment.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Fordham asks, if you had to name just one character, which one do you think has the highest quote-unquote potential? K9, you can start us off.
Palm. That's it. Palm.
Amaron.
I mirror Palm, honestly. I think she has a lot of crazy things, and Java has like peeped me some setups, and I'm just like, dude.
Keep this one.
I'm also inclined to say Palm. The other one I would maybe think about is Shanty, but I think I'm also kind of in the Palm camp just because, like, I mean, I said this earlier. I think it's just ridiculous that this character was not explored to the extent that she was for as long as the game was out.
Yeah. Before you go, Java, I just want to say, Shanty, I think is like obviously contender for being up there, but I think she's already have like good enough tools to where she's just like, it's kind of like known she's very, very good. Like Palm, I still think is underexplored, to be honest.
Palm, so as for my opinion on the character with the most potential, I think Palm has, when played with like really good defense, I think Palm has the most like oppressive play possible in this game. However, I think also Paprika has really good mix, and she can also, like, if they leave basket the way it is, I think she has the stupidest left-right in this entire game. Because Palms, you get cross-up protection against Palm, or you get both cross-up and unblockable protection for like a couple frames. For Paprika's thing, you have to specifically know how it works, or just be lucky. If they're doing a proper mix with basket, and I think if that was explored to its fullest potential, it would be really stupid. But as it stands right now, I think Palm. I think Palm played at like the highest level. You know, would probably be the best character in the game, and I think it should be that way, considering she has like the hardest stuff to explore.
In terms of my opinion, for most potential, if Java hasn't picked up Palm, I would say Paprika. But with the amount of potential that both those characters have, Palm leans a bit more towards in my favor in terms of potential. The amount of things and setups and like defensive potential that she has, with especially with like dogs like Body and Digger, whether it be a neutral on Ulki as mix-ups, a mind game, it's a lot that you can just get away with and, you know, learn on that character. As for Paprika, it's more so the types of players that pick up Paprika that I kind of have a little concerns with. Like, her risk reward values, in my opinion, are kind of skewered. And depending on the type of person you're fighting, like, Paprikas will just go for like the riskiest stuff possible and get massive rewards off of it. But you could argue that that would be dependent on the player's defense as well as how much they're paying attention. In terms of those basket pop setups, like, there's a lot of potential. Like, no one really lets basket sit on screen. They either use it right away or they go for like a hard knockdown with another level one and then use it as a left-right. I feel like that could be explored more, like Java said. And that's pretty much my thoughts, yeah.
Icebound asked, what tactics and playstyles are working only because of online play? Which ones will prevail during offline play? It is so funny that Ice is the one asking this.
Thank you, Icebound.
K9, why don't you start us off?
I think a lot of wilder play, like say super jump fly, cart seat, like Paprika shenanigans, 6Bs from Arizona, and
I hope you have been keeping
just a
up
lot
with
of
your training.
unsafe sort of play that people kind of got away with in 1.0 is definitely not necessarily going to live long in 2.0 as the meta develops. Like, I love Icebound in the chat. 6B won't work. I know. Okay. At least he knows. But
He
yeah.
knows what he's getting into.
Yeah, I think a lot of that play is definitely gonna dwindle, not necessarily dwindle down, but not be as effective as players get like better and like actually learn how to structure offense and defense properly. That's it.
Yeah,
for
I
me.
mirror the sentiments. The thing to understand is rollback netcode is amazing. It lets you play in conditions and connections that you just cannot otherwise. But in order to do that, it needs to sometimes roll back, and that means that some strategies gain a layer of effectiveness that they would not really have offline. Not that they would fully not work. Arizona 6B will still hit players offline, but just not in the same YOLO manner. Like, you can't just go 2C into 6B and
The Foxy.
just be like, oh dang, it didn't work.
Try it again.
The best course of advice I have for what tactics and playstyles are working, the more you lean off of incredibly high risk playstyles like spamming teleports with Paprika, or consistently going for 6Bs or unsafe flights from TN, and the more you start leaning onto more stable forms of play, like focusing on stagger pressure and throw and strike throw mix-ups, the better prepared you will be to when, you know, offline events start making a comeback.
I pretty much mirror everything that's been said. A lot of these overheads, like Oleander 60, Arizona 60, will need to be tossed aside and used only in very specific contexts. A lot of neutral game plans are just going to fall apart in general. I think if a lot of people are just refusing to play mid-range or leaning on one really strong option that's like hard to react to. Meaty timings is the big one for me. Which I know Kane and we meme about that a lot, but like, guys, if the average net play Ragna can land a meaty offline and BB, I promise that people will do it consistently to you. So if you're leaning on like wake up Telly C or like wake up flash kick or some nonsense like that, you're gonna get blown the heck up because people will not let you get away with that. Everything's gonna be so much tighter and faster. Everyone's reactions are gonna be sharper. And I think people really downplay the effects that small rollbacks can have on things like an overhead. You know, if you're losing 3 to 4 frames on an overhead because of rollback, even if you don't see it immediately, that does make a noticeable difference in your ability to block it. Like, and if you ever get offline replays, I promise you, if you go and look at them and see what things you blocked seemingly on reaction within like 2 to 3 frame windows, it will definitely show. There'll be a lot of things because that's just where a lot of offensive choices are in this game, is they're just on the edge, that if they're not on the stack you might be able to hit them, but if they're on the stack they'll just block it every time.
Absolutely. Like losing 3 to 3. I'm sorry. Go on.
No, you go.
I was just gonna say losing like those 3 to 4 frames on rollback is what makes Velvet Chattersea kind of annoying, Loki. But yeah, go on.
Having half of V-Dash's frames stolen.
Yeah, it's just like, what happened to me? Yeah, go
So
on.
I think a good analogy for people to think about when thinking about how these strategies are going to change when people are offline is this is going to be the same thing for like unsafe overheads and for relying on people not to meaty. I think a similar thing is going to happen to that, like what happened with 2.2D, all these 2.2D going from 1.0 to 2.0. You know, you can't just spam that like ignorantly because people can consistently and reliably punish it. And I
God.
feel like in addition to that, there are certain moves that you can do that might not necessarily be unsafe, but they might make people block the wrong way because they look really stupid on rollback. I'm looking at Tian level 2 2D into whatever.
That is not hitting
fakest
anyone
thing
offline. That literally, that is not hitting anyone offline. Neither is super jump V-Dash.
Oh my gosh. it is quite something. But like, definitely just, I feel like a big, good litmus test for most people is like, okay, if you're not sure if something's gonna actually like mix people up reliably both on and offline, just have like a training bot do it to you. And if you have your like set Arizona dummy to like either like 5B 6B or like 5B 5C, and just see if you can react to the difference between the two, for an example. And then set, maybe try changing your delay or setting like different things and seeing how that affects your ability to react to it. Like, that's a big thing. Also, now that I bring that up, a big thing to keep in mind is like when you're getting more rollbacks, it's also when you have more delay. And that like kind of compounds the problem. It makes things like funny overheads that are very unsafe much harder to block, because in addition to having fewer frames to look at, you have fewer frames to react physically. So, it's another thing that makes them even less real than you'd think they would be.
Piggybacking off of what Java just said, like reactable overheads and reactable, mix-ups and setups, most of the riskier ones will not work on like the intermediate to high level play in offline. Personally, I haven't actually attended an offline scene myself since I recently got into fighting games like 2 years ago, but from what I've researched, it's a very different realm of players, especially in the high level play. You won't see as much risky plays as you see on net play. Just watching like other tournaments such as, Street Fighter 5, Skullgirls, Tekken, like all those other offline scenes have a very like reserved play styles, and they only take a risk when they absolutely have the stack on the player.
Deep breaths, Grunkle. Deep breaths.
How did you know I was fucking... Sorry. God, he's gonna blow me up for that one. How did you know that I was like my heart rate spiked so high? Anyway. Sorry, Zale, was that your last thought?
There's one more thing. In terms of character, if you're thinking about character meta in offline versus net play, I still think Arizona will probably be one of the strongest, if not the strongest, in terms of that. But other than that, like, there's definitely not going to be as much risk involved in well, there's going to be a risk if you go for the risky moves, obviously, but there won't be as many going for risk, if you know what I'm saying, in offline. That's all I'd say.
Yeah, anyway, so we got one last question. Y'all have it in you. Dragon121 Red asks, could you give some great words of encouragement for new players who might not feel they don't measure up to other players?
Ooh, can I do this first?
Sure.
Okay, I'm actually one of the top players in this game right now. I did extremely well with Arizona in 1.0, and while I haven't competed as much in 2.0, I've been doing very well in scrims against people who have been. And I went 0-2 the first few tournaments I entered in this game. When I started, when 1.0 launched a little less than a year ago, I wasn't great at the game. And I just, kept at it and honestly kept losing, because losing is where I learned the most. Because if you win, you're like, oh, whatever I did worked. I mean, I guess. But when you're losing, you see what doesn't work, and you see, okay, if I do 6B on them and they block it, I'm kind of getting punished. Stuff like that. So the more you play, and even if you're not winning, the more you learn, and just making small goals for yourself to reach, the more you can do at any level. So, I mean, if I can make it to this, I think a lot of y'all could too, even starting from nothing. So don't let you losing at first discourage you from keeping trying, because it's part of the experience.
When I started TFH, I had no prior fighting game knowledge. The only thing I had was just a lot of Smash 4 competitive experience, where I learned most of my neutral from, but I lost a lot. And back in when I first started TFH was early access, there was a lot of messed up things and demoralizing things in this game. I have to say, you guys are very thankful you are starting now, because Back in
Early access is the longest waste land.
it was so bad. The Tions, the high ping Tions were raining. The freaking damage was absolutely insane. There's a lot of things, but like the main thing I have to say that kept me going was like, well, for one, like playing good ping players, but I'm also just like wanting to learn, because losing, it doesn't necessarily, it's not a bad thing. Losing doesn't mean you're like not learning anything. The only time you're not learning anything is when you choose not to learn anything. Like winning doesn't necessarily mean you're learning either. It's just a sort of byproduct of being either outplaying somebody or just like, I don't know, like sort of like learning slightly. I don't know. It's just the main things you want to focus on when starting as a new player is just playing the game for fun. That is your main focus, because at the end of the day, this is a game and you should be playing it for fun. Like that's all it has to be said. Like if you're feeling super like down on yourself, you should not push yourself to a certain degree to where you're just not having any fun with the game. That's just gonna kill your drive for the game, kill everything for the game for you. You should just enjoy the game how it is and take your time with it. That's all.
A9 speaks the true.
Wow, true.
Um,
Ooh, you're a posh one,
yeah,
aren't
it's
ya?
a lot of it is mindset. A lot of it
And what are
is
you supposed
definitely
to be?
mindset, because
Round 1.
as stated, losing is okay. If anything, when you start to like have the drive to learn and improve, you look for the losses more than the victories, at least for me, because losses give you objective data for improvement. That's not to say that wins don't either, but you just get so much value out of a loss. And when I started playing this game, I would get schooled constantly, over and over and over, by some of the best players in the game, such as Mr. Pretty Kitty, rest his soul, I'll never forget him. And
I'll miss him.
I'll miss him. It's like he's still here with us. And you know, like they were major losses, like 50 game lose streaks and whatnot. And at certain points, it was frustrating. It was very frustrating. But sometimes you just gotta take a breath, chillax, and one important thing that I recommend is having some avenue to rewatch your matches. So now that the replay system for TFH exists, there's no excuse really. Going back to like look at your match with a clear head to like actually analyze what you're doing and what's happening is probably the biggest boon you could give yourself in order to improve. That's kind of what I have to say on the matter.
So I'm in sort of a weird position because I'm kind of the opposite of most people here, where I had a lot of fighting game, not only a lot of fighting game experience before playing this game, but I had a lot of fighting game experience in BBCF, which in my opinion is structured very similar to this game. So I already kind of had the foundation in place for learning, which even though the experience gap definitely shows when I play some players in the tournament, has kind of led to my success as a competitive player. My best advice, well, there's two. In addition to using all the tools in game, replay wise, I definitely think it's good to be involved in this community because it's just a really good community. There's a video not about TFH called How to Have Fun Playing Starcraft that I think is the learning foundation everyone should use to get better at fighting games. And remember, like no one's gonna make fun of you for losing unless you're like saying really stupid things and just like rage posting all the time. Then people will make fun of you for losing. But for the most part, like when I see a player who's like clearly new, don't have a lot of experience, but they're just like asking a lot of questions because they want to understand, everyone is like dude, we'll do everything we can to help you out. It's
Like, it's actually the best.
Yeah.
Like, I love those people so much.
yeah. And I guess what I'm trying to say is like, don't be too nervous. There's always gonna be toxic people. like K9. But
Yeah.
it's unfortunate. I'll miss her.
Hate to see it.
But,
well.
like,
Oh.
I was just, let me just finish up. Sorry, Zale. But like overall, it's just don't be afraid to get involved with people who play the game you're playing, because like we want you to keep playing and have a good time playing the game in any way that we can help with that, whether it's like mindset stuff or gameplay related stuff. There's actually a whole channel in the TFH Discord called the Training Channel, I think, which is good for this. It's a really good way to just like ease the stress. If you just get comfortable playing a couple people regularly, that's fine. If you end up just wanting to play everyone, that's fine too. But yeah, I'm basically saying, like, don't be intimidated. Like, no one's making fun of your play unless you're saying really silly things. And if you're just like asking questions and trying to learn, like, we're all gonna support and encourage you. That's the kind of community.
Speaking of community, please do not be afraid to ask questions or get involved with any of us. We are just all here to help you out. Like, when I first started TFH, which is like I said before, 2 years ago, I had zero fighting game knowledge. The only fighting game knowledge I had was like probably old, maybe like Street Fighter 4. I played with my family as like a party game. I didn't even play as a fighting game competitively. Other than that, like, I had zero knowledge. And once I got into TFH, I started research. I started asking questions. I started like changing my mindset a lot about how I felt about certain characters, certain matchups, and took it in stride, where I realized that all of it is pretty much on me putting myself out there. Because if I didn't put myself out there, I would not be here right now. Especially considering that, you know, I made a lot of friends, got all my friends here with me, fighting Foenatics. People know me. I know people in higher places.
People know
Yeah, I'm a
you?
person in a higher place. Yes.
Where are
Yeah,
you?
'cause
Slam
you
around.
died.
You died. But yeah, it's just like a fear factor. I know people are shy and nervous and they don't want to like sound stupid, but if it's a genuine question that you have, just don't be afraid to ask it. Like, we're all here to help the learning experience move along. Getting into fighting games isn't easy.
All right.
Isn't for everybody. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Sorry about that. What was I saying? Crap. Oh yeah, getting into fighting games isn't easy. I'll tell you that much. It wasn't easy for me. I'm pretty sure it wasn't easy for everyone. It's really degrading sometimes, especially when losing, but you have to keep in mind that losing will not facilitate like your ability to improve. It will help you have a better perspective. Now that replays are in, like Amaron said, like, perspective is everything when it comes to improvement in fighting games. There is a lot that you have to look into and keep in mind of.
Hard.
Yeah.
They are very hard.
Thankfully, over the years, there's been more and more and more resources to help improve that information chasm, I think you could call it. Lots of amazing content creators like Sajam, Infiltration, I believe, just recently released like the video game fighting game glossary. No, it was. Listen, whatever it's called. In Filament, excuse me. Thank you, Maida. And thankfully, like, there's been more and more and more resources coming out, and just like said earlier, in the TFH Discord itself, we have a training channel with a lot of good just discussion and pinned resources for any player that wants it.
Heck, even I have
Also,
like a
a special thing about this community in general is like literally top players are in the VC publicly accessible like most of the time. So while we might not always be playing TFH, we're like almost always open for like questions if you just want to hang or whatever. So yeah, feel free to come by. It's a public Discord, you know, big old lunch table for all of us to sit at. Let's go.
No goth girls.
Somewhat, yeah. But one thing I want to say before we wrap things up is that I believe if this game was like balanced around like the highest ping I believe this game would be dead. Like, no joke. I'm sorry. Okay.
I don't think any game balances around hyping.
That's what I'm
Hope
saying.
not. Okay.
Anyway, go.
Some games just don't balance around anything TBH. We don't worry about that.
All right,
save that for
guys.
another
I
time.
think this is our sign. We need to wrap things up. We like lose brain cells the longer these things go on. Anyway, quick thing. I'm Grunkle Barlow. You can follow me on Twitter at Grunkle Barlow. You can ping me on Discord at Grunkle Barlow. My name is usually something stupid. Y'all just wanna, yeah. Java, where can people find you?
Hey y'all, I'm Java Morris. My tag on Twitter is at Java Morris. My tag on Discord's at Java Morris. Just like Grunkle, I usually have a stupid nickname, but doesn't mean you can't at me. I might not get back to you immediately, but if you just like message me or at me on Discord, I'll try to answer any questions you got. And if you want to join in a fun tournament in NA, we got Rodeo Regional, and we also got a, well, I'll let Grunkle talk about any FF tournaments if we're going to do that, but yeah, so just at Java Morris on any platform you choose.
Zale, where can people find you?
Hey, I'm Zale, and my tag on Twitter is Zale_H, as well as on Twitch, where I do stream occasionally, maybe like once or twice a month, but I do stream sometimes. I do play on stream more often, so I hope to catch you there. And like, if you have any questions and concerns about TFH or the progression in fighting game from a new player's perspective, feel free to ask me. I'm available on Discord pretty much all the time.
Alright.
And yeah, that's it.
K9, do you even want people to find you?
Yeah, don't find me.
Okay,
Y'all just do
Amaron,
your
where,
stuff.
Amaron, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Bushnock. You can also find me on Twitch when I sometimes stream on AMARO57. I'm gonna try to be better about actually starting to post like Oleander Tech on Twitter. So
Well, let's go.
follow for some
Let's
good
pick
stuff,
what's mine.
hopefully.
Let us break the ice. Round
On
one.
that note, as also an FF organizer, Grunkle, can I use this as a chance to segue into Stampede Circuit?
Yes, please.
So right now, guys, the Fighting Foenatics are partnering up with Main 6 for TFH's first ever tournament circuit series. It's called the Grand Stampede Circuit Series, and last month we ended an amazing Stampede Series event number 1. Amazing turnout, the games were amazing, the chat was fun, the support in Matcherino was phenomenal, and next week on Saturday is Stampede Series event number 2. This will be the second tournament, another chance to qualify for tournament seeding, another chance to prove your merit, and just have a blast in a tournament environment. So absolutely, join the official TFH channel, join the official Fighting Foenatics Discord. You can find it in the description in Twitch. If you scroll down a bit, and we sincerely hope to see everybody there, and it's going to be a great time.
Okay. I think that about wraps it up. Thank you guys so much for watching. We love y'all. Take care. Have a good one.
Broke you without
Have a good
breaking
one.
sweat.
Yeah.
Velvet wins.